stress. So me talking is worrying you, isn't it? So you ready now?
Yeah, I am. I'm just going to hide my picture because it will save my broadband, and I need that to.
That's because you live in Somerset. They use tin cans and string there, don't they?
I think so. Must do.
Okay, go on then. Hide your picture. Ladies and gentlemen, Caroline McKendrick.
Right, so the first case that we're going to have a look at this evening is called The Disappearing Mail. This is a personal experience of mine that I had in Higher Oddcombe in Yeovil. So just to let you know whereabouts it is within the Yeovil area. So this is Yeovil itself, and the area that we're looking at is where the pin has been dropped. I don't know if many of you know Somerset. You've got Dorchester down this way, you've got Ilchester and London that goes out towards this way, and then we've got Sherborne, which goes down to Weymouth over here. This is a little bit more of a close-up view, so you can see that this area here, we're going to be looking at here within Higher Oddcombe. Where I saw this myself is here, and as you can clearly see, there's nothing for miles. There's houses to the right and nothing to the left apart from fields. A little bit more of a close-up. So this is the area we're going to be looking at more closely. If you can see this area here on Camp Road, this is high hedge. So there's nothing that you can do to walk through or get past. There's no way that you can evade this. It's a high hedge. And again, this is close up a little bit more using Google Earth. And you can see that hedge is quite high, and it moves around the whole of this field to encase it. And again, from another angle, you can see the height. This is here of the public road sign. So that height, it's even higher than that hedge. And this is another angle that you can see it better. So look at where the sign is now. This is where I saw this mail. It was summertime, probably about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had been visiting my family in Yeovil, and I was heading back, and this is a road that I've used many, many times. As I'm looking left down the road now, this would take you back in towards Yeovil area. I would travel usually straight across to go home, or I would travel right to go to see my horses to look after them because they were on Ham Hill, just to the right of this road. But for the purpose of this event, I'm going to be going left in a minute in a video that I've prepared for you to simulate what I saw. So it's midsummer, it's about 4 o'clock, mid-afternoon, and I'm traveling home, and I see a male walking across this part of the road, and he's wearing a hoodie and it's pulled up over his head. His hands are shoved deep into his pocket, and he is just walking across with purpose across the road. And I look left, I look right, and check the roads both ways, and then look back left again before I was going to pull across in a straight line to drive over the crossroads. And when I'd looked back the second left time, he disappeared. He was no longer there, and there literally is nothing on this road that he could get through. You can see that hedge. It's absolutely, you know, it's higher than me. It's about 6.5 foot. And behind, if I could actually get the computer to go backwards, you can see that there is another high hedge, and also a lower hedge and a brick wall. And I would have seen, because I was parked dead on that junction, I would have seen that male had he have tried to go back on himself to where the house is. He didn't have time. He crossed the road. I watched him cross, and then he disappeared in front of my eyes. So Martin and I, that's my partner, went off in January and we recreated this for you. So I've got a little video for you to have a look at, but I apologise in advance. It must have been one of the brightest days that we've had this year, and it was quite light as we were trying to actually record it. But this is a simulation of what we experienced. There is no sound to this, so please don't worry. So I was driving up this road, and I've done it, like I say, many, many times before. Pulled up at the junction. I was going to head straight over to go to home, which was Crewe Cairn area. I looked left, there's the mail. I looked right so I could pull out, looked back left again, and he literally disappeared in front of my eyes. Nowhere to be seen. So I'm going to travel down this road with you now to show you the height of the fence and the hedge. As you can see, nothing's changed in the last few years that this happened. This happened to me in about 2016. Sorry, how can I get rid of that? CJ, do you know how to get rid of that?
Try clicking on the X, see if that works. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. So I was chatting to a friend of mine, my neighbour next door, Karen. She's one of my team members. So when we were chatting, I was saying to her about some of the experiences that I've had myself over the years. And I'd said this experience and I told her that it was Higher Odcombe in Yeovil, and explained where the crossroads were. And she said, this sounds really familiar. I'm sure that I've heard this story before. She said, but it was a different area. It wasn't in Higher Odcombe. It was over the top of Ham Hill, down the other side to Stoke-sub-Hamden, in an area called Holy Tree. And Holy Tree was an alleged area that they used to have hangings back in the old days. So I said to her, who was it that told you this? Can you go back and check and make sure that this is the area that definitely was where he said happened? So Karen went into work and she asked a neighbour, her work colleague, and her work colleague said, no, it wasn't Holy Tree. It was up at Higher Odcombe. It was exactly the same place that I had experienced this. He was travelling back during, I think it was a late evening one night with his friends in his car, and they were driving. And this guy pulled out across the road in front of him and just disappeared in front of their eyes. And they had no explanation. Obviously, he didn't want to tell her in front of his work colleagues because he was a little bit concerned he may be ridiculed. So he went back to her and told her privately the first time that he told her. So when she went back to clarify where it was that she experienced, or he experienced this, he said, yes, it definitely was up there in Higher Odcombe. So we have corroboration that this is more than just once for a road ghost that has been seen. But as far as I'm aware, it's never been made into a report. So after tonight, this talk, you're the first to hear this from me live. I'm going to submit the reports with the other person's name and mine so that they can be logged within ASSAP's records. So luckily that more than just me can corroborate this story. Moving on, the Screaming Skull of Chilton Canterlow. The legend of the Screaming Skull. So what are Screaming Skulls? The legend of the Screaming Skull seems to be a legend or a folklore peculiar to Britain alone. These skulls are said to be guardian protector spirits to bring luck to a house. And they can also be vengeful spirits that are tied to a location for all eternity, promising doom and destruction if their remains are disturbed. What is a screaming skull, I hear you ask? Well, it's a paranormal object, usually a human skull. Legend said it speaks, screams, or haunts its environment if it's moved or tampered with. It is common belief that the skull is the root of the soul in many primitive tribes. And I'm sure there's a few of you who are a little bit more experienced in folklore that can give us. So although the stories regarding the origin of the skulls do vary from case to case, the problems that follow when the skull is moved seem to have a lot in common. Some of the problems reported include bad luck, poltergeist activity, such as knocks, bangs, and raps, and allegedly blood-curdling screams. At least one of the skulls has been professionally examined over the years and has been found to be considerably older than the legend suggested. So maybe the stories of the screaming skulls were made up to ward off unwanted visitors, or perhaps to explain other inexplicable phenomena. We don't know. So, in a corner of South Somerset, the story of Theophilus Broome, or more specifically his skull, is one that has been mentioned a number of times over the years. Those local to the area have grown up hearing these stories of the screaming skull. So as we can see, this is Yeovil main town centre here. And we're looking at going out on the Master Magna Road, heading towards Chiltern Canterlow here. And this is a little bit more of a zoomed in area. So when you get to the Chiltern Canterlow itself, that you come through, you turn in to here. This is going in towards the school. Some more pictures in a minute. It was currently called the Park School because Chiltern Canterlow had sold it to the park, but now Park is closed as well. So as far as I'm aware, this is an empty premise. But when I heard about this, my son went to school and heard the information about this from the person whose house the skull is in. That's my connection here with this one. But again, just before you turn into the village itself of Chiltern Canterlow, this is the area that tells you where it is that we're going. It's on the crossroads. So the events that surround this story go back about 350 years. In the village of Chiltern Canterlow stands the Grade II listed Anglican Church of St James. The tower was built in the 15th century and parts of the church date back earlier than that. But in 1864 to 1865, it was restored by Sir Arthur Bloomfield and the Reverend Charles Goodford while he was a church pastor there. In a crypt beneath this church lays the headless skeleton of Theophilus Broome. During this time, the Reverend Goodford and his family also built part of Chiltern Canterlow House. This later became Chiltern Canterlow School and more recently the park. The building here stands southwest of the church. And for those of you that are really interested, my son's bedroom was there when he stayed as a dorm, in that dorm. Okay, so Broome was originally from Warwickshire, and during the English Civil War, Theophilus Broome had originally been a staunch royalist. However, it was said that he was so appalled by the way in which the king's troops treated their prisoners that he defected and became a Roundhead. After the war had ended and King Charles II was restored to the throne, the story says Broome fled his hometown due to the civil unrest and spent the rest of his years in the Somerset village with his sister and his brother-in-law. Broome died at Higher Farm, previously known as Higher Chiltern Farm, on the 18th of August in 1670 at the age of 69 years of age. On his deathbed, Broom requested to his sister and her husband that they removed his head and to keep it away from his body within the walls of the home which they lived opposite the church. The reasons behind his last wishes were understandable, given that Broom had been a royalist, also known as a cavalier. Early during the English Civil War, Broom later converted to the parliamentarians, also known as the Roundheads. Broom had become disillusioned by the monarchy because of the way they brutalised and humiliated their prisoners. Oliver Cromwell, who was also a Roundhead, was famously laid to rest at Westminster Abbey in 1658, only later to be dug up by the rival Cavaliers in 1661. He was taken to the famous Tyburn gallows, hung in chains, and then beheaded for his opposition of the monarchy and his role in beheading the King Charles I. At that time, Cromwell's head was then put on display outside Westminster Hall on a long pike. Theophilus Broom feared that upon his death, the Cavaliers would track him down and subject his body to the same treatment as Cromwell's, with his head disinterred, put on public display at Traitors' Gate for being a traitor to the king. Therefore, he made his request to his sister for his head to be removed. There was a time where there was doubt whether the skull really belonged to Broom, but during the 18th century restoration of the church, his crypt was opened and the skeleton was shown to be missing the skull, and that strongly suggested that the story was true. Following the death of his sister, there's been a numerous number of attempts of reburying the skull to return it to the rest of his remains, or simply removing it from the farm by subsequent owners. According to the 1791 book, History and the Antiquities of the County of Somerset by John Collinson, he was the first person who actually put story and pen to paper. He said, if removed, it made horrid noises, portentive of a sad displeasure. It was these noises that gave the name the Screaming Skull, and it was quickly returned to the resting place inside the farmhouse. When the skull has been removed, poltergeist activity has been said to occur. One man is said to have died after being hit on the head by falling roof slates from the church while he tried to bury the relic on the church grounds. The last time the skull was removed from the walls of the farmhouse was as long ago as 1770, when a sexton, or otherwise known as a groundsman of the church, believed he was doing the right thing by attempting to inter the skull back into the ground, giving it once a proper burial, once and for all. And the story goes that just as he completed the digging, his spade broke in two. He saw this as a bad omen and he returned the skull forthwith to the farmhouse. John Collinson in the 1791 book refers to this event as a probable final attempt at burying the skull, and that happened 20 years before he wrote about it. Interestingly, author Peter Underwood stated in his book Ghosts of Somerset in 1985 that Sexton's attempted burial happened in the 1860s, some 70 years after Collinson's book had been published. Now, I'm not one to question the great Peter Underwood, but the dates don't match. So could it be possible that the authors were referring to two separate but very similar events? Or perhaps readily available accurate information just wasn't available to Mr. Underwood in 1985. Underwood also wrote that since the last attempted burial, there were occasions when the skull was treated with disrespect. He wrote that in 1826, during structural alterations at the farm, the workmen took it in turns to use the skull as a mug for their beer, passing it from one person to the next. Following this, nothing untoward was reported, suggesting that only removal or attempted burial of the skull could cause paranormal phenomena. But on the other hand, in 1977, some researchers examined the skull. Two of them moved it with their bare hands and were overheard making jokes about it and questioning the authenticity of the legend. When the two men had set off to return to London, one of them thought he saw a car with bright headlights shining towards him. So he swerved and he crashed his car and he was injured. The other man was badly burned when he dropped a cigarette into the folds of his trouser leg. Underwood states that both men were convinced that their misfortunes were the result from their foolishness for handling and mocking Broom's skull. A much more sinister version of events about this story was given by author Richard Pidgley when he stated that the male involved in the road accident was actually killed. It's worth mentioning that Pidgley said that he also held a séance with friends beside the grave of Broom in the churchyard, but Broom's remains were beneath the church crypt. And go back to that one. As with most folklore stories of this kind, it has various subplots, which seems to be added over the years. But unlike some other tales and legends, the basic facts were very, very well recorded, and for the most part are accepted as the truth. Assuming that the stories of the Screaming Skull and the unusual events are true, one alternative to the suggested hauntings was that his sister, the guardian of his skull and the first guardian, was potentially causing the strange activity whenever the skull was tampered with. She may have desperately wanted to keep her promise to her brother. But this alternative suggestion is a proposal that I'm making to you, and it's not been heard before. So to this day, Broom's skull sits within the wall-mounted wooden cabinet at Higher Farm, opposite the church, where the rest of his remains still lay, as a reminder of human superstition. The church's warden and most current owner of Higher Farm are Mr. and Mrs. Curtin. And that's K-E-R-T-O-N, not the type that you hang. So Mr. Curtin has lived in the farmhouse since his birth and has been the keeper of Theophilus's skull for most of his life. As I said before, I had the pleasure of meeting him on a few occasions at school events that my son attended. Mr. Curtin described the location of Broom's crypt and explained that the headless remains remain currently in the northernmost corner of the building. When asked, Mr. Curtin wasn't in favour of the popular Screaming Skull stories, and he said the story of the roof slates falling onto someone's head probably wasn't true either. But he did believe that the skull watched over him and his wife, and he did admit to strange occurrences happening in the household whenever the skull was disturbed, but any more than that, and he wouldn't elaborate. Peter Underwood, he quoted Mrs. Curtin in his 1985 book, and she stood by the claims that all attempts in burying the skull resulted in the manifestation of horrible noises. The Chiltern Cantelow skull is quieter in its cupboard than in a grave, and it refuses to be buried. So moving back into Yeovil now, and I do have a few of my teammates here with me today watching this. So I'm expecting questions, ladies, because you're involved in this report that I've put here. So this again is the Yeovil area, Yeovil town centre, and as you can see, the pin drop is where we're going. A little bit closer in, and you can see Stars Lane and a red pin drop here. So it's to the southeast side of Yeovil town centre, and this is the hospital over here. Okay, a Google Earth view here. This is Stars Lane. You would come in from this direction. So anybody who knows Yeovil very well, opposite over here is the entertainments park. So you have the cinema, you have the bowling, and all that kind of stuff across the road here. You would drive in and then you would come and park here in the car park. So Chicago Rock is kind of like on a jaunty angle to the road, and you'll see a better picture of it in a minute when we click forward. But this place here isn't all Chicago Rock. You could probably split it down the middle. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. So as I've said, this is from the main road, and you would turn into the car park here, and this building here is Chicago Rock. And you can see it a little bit more. And that's it full on. It's not attractive, it's not known for its beauty, but Bayek, as ghost hunters, you've got everything you want in one building. This is in the top 2 of the places that our team have ever investigated. Still blows our mind what we experienced here that night. So, as I said to you a minute ago, the whole building wasn't part of it. So this is the back part of the building. Here, you can see through the trees. And there was an entrance. I don't know now how it works. I haven't been to this building for quite a while, but this was the council office for a while. And there was a radio station. Below was Poundland. So this is a nicer side view rather than the straight on of Chicago Rock. So let's go back one. A little bit of history of this place. So before it was Chicago Rock, it used to be a quick save cash and carry supermarket. It was open to anybody, general members of the public. And it first opened as a licensed premises by the Chicago Rock Cafe pub chain in the early 90s. It briefly changed to be an outlet for the Modelo bar a little bit after that. So I think probably in about 2005, I think it changed. And then in 2016, it changed back to its current use as Chicago Rock. A little bit better at PowerPoints, I would have had a picture of me over the top of this police car, whizzing in front of it, and just to make you all giggle and have 5 seconds of fun of quite a serious talk. But one of my previous roles that I've had, from 1997 to 2009, I was a serving police officer for Avon and Somerset Police. In approximately 1998, while on a night shift with Avon and Somerset Police, we used to get call outs to attend the key holder to this nightclub. It was generally around about 3:45 in the morning. The burglar alarm would always be triggered. So as I said, there were frequent call outs every weekend during the night shift. So that would be from 6 o'clock till 3 o'clock, or late shift, which would go on to 7 o'clock in the morning. So when we arrived, we generally did a perimeter search to ensure that nobody had broken into one of the external doors. Right, as I've said before, this was split down the middle here. So this area here was Chicago Rock. This was the entrance that I showed you from the middle street, that you could get into the top part that was used as the recording radio station. So the main way that we would come in would be up through Stars Lane. We would turn right into Middle Street with the police car, and we would park up here. And there was a gate, a black gate, that used to let yourself through with a PIN code that we had to attend. And we would come up the side here to check to make sure that everything was all in order, and there was no break-in visible. Once we were happy that that was the case, we either get back in the police car, drive back round, not come down here because it was a one-way street, but we would find our way back and park in here and wait for the key holder to attend. Right, so once we went into the building and we did this search with the key holder, it was very eerie. Very uncomfortable feeling, especially in the corridor going down towards the staff office. So you have the main nightclub in the front here with the bar that was through the side. And to get to the office, you would go through the back here, and the offices would run all along here. And then there would be a back entrance to come back into the kitchen. So this is the main area that we were being reported that there was problems going on. So every time we came and we checked the whole of the premise, it was always fire door that had been triggered. There was nobody else in the building. There was no reason for that to go off. Nobody had this from the middle street hadn't been opened, it hadn't been accessed, and there was no signs of tampering or entering at all. So after my team's third or fourth call out over a really short period of time, I suggested that the manager have a look at the system with the alarm company, get it checked, and perhaps look at changing the equipment in case it was faulty. But despite having all of these recommendations done, the alarms were still being triggered, especially by that fire door. So after the last call out, I returned to the station where I wrote up a report, debriefed the boss, and I suggested that we stopped attending along with the key holder if the alarms went off again in the future. I felt that it was wasting valuable resources for non-urgent call outs. Luckily, my recommendation was taken on board from the boss, and we never attended in conjunction with the key holder again. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Boss left the police in 2009. Around 2010, I'd gone on to set up a paranormal investigation team in Somerset. Around 2014, we merged with another group. In September 2016, lots of yokels, excuse the expression, local yokels in Yeovil contacted our group and told us to look at the posts on Facebook that Chicago Rock were posting. Excuse me a minute. The posts and videos showed claims of paranormal activity, such as bar stools moving and figures showing themselves on the dance floor. Now, I've had really terrible trouble with my computer over the last few days, and I can't get the links to link to this, so apologies. But if you wanted to further look at this, you can go to Chicago's Facebook page, 15th of September 2016 and 20th of September 2016, they're still there. So they were a little bit dubious, to be honest with you, and they did look staged. So I just kind of rolled my eyes a little bit and didn't respond to the comments that were coming in. So not long after I received those messages, I received a phone call from the manager, Matthew Jarrett. He explained to me that the videos that he posted on Facebook were 100% fake, and it was done as an advertisement campaign to bring some excitement and a full club for the Halloween events. And they were having lots of events, including drive-in horror movies. But he went on to say that they really were having paranormal activity happening in the building, and it was getting worse. It was beginning to frighten the staff, and they were leaving. And could we come in and investigate? The staff had been experiencing numerous happenings in that building. So one lady called Trina said, "We always hear noises and footsteps down the corridor, people throwing things against the wall. And we've had some really freaky incidents too. One of my colleagues was in the hallway and was saying, 'Clap your hands if you're there.' And when she came back in the office, we heard the sound of the clapping in the corridor. We were so scared, absolutely terrified, that we locked ourselves into the office. They told us of a sense of being watched constantly in the office, the spirit store, and the corridor. The kitchen had a very eerie feeling, and things were being moved, and by the back door, the fire door, it felt very oppressive." Georgina Jennings Huntington said, "The kitchen used to be haunted when I worked there. When it was opened in 1999, stuff would fall off the shelves and things would be moved constantly when nobody was there." So we made arrangements to visit and investigate on the 5th of October, 2016. So if we just go back to this, if anybody wants to, you can see, this is Matthew Jarrett. He has a video, it was a live video at the time. And I don't like being called ghost hunters, but I take his apology for that one because he's a wonderful chap. 5th 5th of October, we were going in to do our investigation. When we got there that evening, I recounted to Matthew Jarrett my previous alarm issues with the back fire door that I had experienced to him, and I asked if the rear fire door was one of those areas they were experiencing paranormal activity. His face dropped and he just looked at me with an open mouth and was shocked. And he said, "Do you know what? Those alarms are always being triggered in that area, resulting in call outs with the security team. And I've had the whole place rewired," he said. "All of the equipment changed, twice none the least. And they were always the same problem, always the fire door that would trigger it, and nothing, 2-3 times he changed his equipment, nothing happened, nothing changed." So they had been getting several areas affected by the paranormal activity. That fire door was one of them. And he, on his own CTV, had captured a lot of odd camera recordings for that area, including a partial manifestation of a female. So we decided to pay attention to this area early on in that investigation. Donna and I were sat on the steps next to the toilet door, which was facing the front of the fire door. The rest of the team and the staff, and I forgot to mention that Somerset Live had been invited by Matthew Jarrett as well. So we had a reporter and a cameraman who were also filming and making videos of the evening as well. So the reporters, along with the staff, were all stood behind us. The toilet doors to the right of us had been overpainted during the renovations. So by that, I mean, they were completely too big to fit the gap. They were very tight and it stuck when you tried to shut the door and it wouldn't shut fully. The door closer had a little bit of resistance to it, but when you tried pushing it, it did open. And I'd like to mention that the toilet doors opened inwards from the corridor. So Donna at this point was calling out. She was asking if there was somebody there, could they bang on the door or knock on the door to let us know they were there? There was a loud bang on this overpainted door and it slammed shut with full force. We all jumped out of our skin because the force of the door was really pretty horrific, to be honest. I got up and checked the door to see if it would open easily again. It didn't. You needed to put your shoulder hard into the door to push it to open it. And once it was open again, it stayed in that stuck open position, not closed properly, for the rest of the evening. So straight after closing the door, I reviewed the audio to see if anything had come through during the questioning and the call out session. And when I asked a question, there was this blood curdling growl in response to the question I'd asked. I said, "Step forward and let us hear your voice. Please speak to us and tell me your name." We didn't hear anything at the time of the call out, but there was absolutely no way in denying that it was on that recording of an EVP. I'll try and recreate the noise for you, but it was along the lines of, it doesn't sound very terrifying with a slightly sore throat, but at the time when you've got headphones on and you're reviewing it, that frightened the kahoonies out of me. So when I heard it, I took the headphones off really quickly and I said, no, 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 that's it, I'm done. I left the equipment on the floor and walked off. I started pacing up and down the corridor. It's one of the only times that I've really been unnerved by what I've heard. So Donna replayed it for everyone else to hear without the headphones. And when they heard it, they were quite disturbed by the noise too. After this, we set an IR camera up in that corridor with a movement sensor light to run whilst we carried on looking at the rest of the building. Later, when we reviewed the footage, we captured activity. The movement sensor light came on with nobody there. So after leaving that corridor, we walked through the main bar and we're hearing whistles. And I said, "Everybody, just shush a minute." And everybody did. And I said, "Who's whistling?" And no one said it was them. So we carried on walking towards the kitchen. And as we were walking towards the kitchen, we kept on hearing the whistles. In the kitchen, Marion did a call out and she asked if anyone was there to whistle. So we had responses. We could hear them clearly with our own ears in reply to her questions. And I make a point of saying that we heard them with our own ears, as opposed to we heard them later on review as an electronic voice phenomena. So it was obviously something that we'd heard, and all of us had that same experience. So Marion then went on as a joke, and she said, well, if you're happy, then whistle while you work. And we had the response came back as the song, and it went like this. Well, that was just mind-blowing. You know, there was nobody else in the building. The noise where it came from was the middle of the kitchen. We all had clear view. We were stood around the kitchen. There was no possibility that anyone could have done anything to create that. And, you know, I don't even think that the guy was primed to put anything in there to fake this. He was legitimately floored by what we were experiencing. So apart from those few things I've mentioned to you, we did have other things happen that evening as well. Physical touching was one of them. We got to look around the other parts of the building. So we went up the stairs and we had a look around all of this area that used to be part of the council and the radio recording studio. It's a really weird feeling to be in the upstairs of a completely empty building in this huge expanse. Very, very eerie. When we returned back downstairs to the bar and we were packing our stuff up, we were constantly hearing whistles, as if somebody was so desperate to speak to us to give us a message. But by now it was very late into the early hours of the morning and we'd all had enough, so it was time to call it a night. We were definitely shown a side of this nightclub that not many people get to see. And as far as we know, we've been the only group to ever investigate this property to date. I think it might be time, ladies that are here with me tonight, team members, that we approach the new manager and ask if we could return. There is so much more we need to find out about this place. And as premises goes, it's one of the 2 most active places that the team have ever investigated. So moving on, last but not least, the Chuffs Hotel charred. So again, this is a view of where we are. We have Ilminster and Martock and Yeovil in the centre. I think that's probably, Yeovil's over there. This is me in my house. Chuffs Hotel, I think it's about a 15-minute drive to Chard. A little bit more of a closer view. B&Q, as you're coming in from the Wind Whistle Road, the A30, that takes you past the B&Q Chard, past the little Chard Hospital, up the main street. So this is as you're going up the A30. Now, surprisingly, we do get an awful lot of reports of the A30 and its hauntings. So this being on the A30, I think we can link it somehow. So the history of this place, it's situated on a Roman built road on the main A30, in the high street, in the centre of Chard, in Somerset. It dates back to the 16th century. There is a stream running down either side, just to the other side of these cars, on both sides of the road. And it divides the properties that face each other the entire length of the straight road. One stream runs south to enter the English Channel, whilst on the other side, it heads north to the British Channel, the Bristol Channel, sorry. In the daytime, this looks like any other quaint English inn. Don't be fooled by its warm and welcoming persona, because at night time, it takes on a much different guise. So this is Lord Jeffries, also known as Hanging Judge Jeffries. He was the Baron of Wem. It is recorded that the spirit of the notorious hanging judge has been sighted roaming in an upstairs bedroom, and also occasionally he's been seen crouched at the infamous fireplace in the hotel's bar. So, ladies and gents, just a little break aside from everything that we've had happen this evening. I was experiencing massive problems with my computer from when I was putting my notes together for this PowerPoint. This is the fireplace that people don't usually have much joy with. And when I put this phone onto the computer, it froze everything. I'm not saying it's paranormal, but it could be. We don't know. But I've literally had the computer freeze and nothing printed. And I was panicking when I still hadn't joined online at 5 to 7. So in the autumn of 1685, Jeffries presided over the bloody assizes. They were a series of criminal trials that took place through the West Country after the defeat of Monmouth Rebellion at the Battle of Sedgemoor. The people who were found guilty of treason against the king were sentenced to death. Those who could not afford the huge bribe Jeffries wanted to obtain for them to have a pardon, they faced the gallows. So while conducting his trials at Chard, in the Manor Courthouse, a building that has changed very little since his day, Judge Jeffries.
And the passion is also.
Judge Jeffries sentenced 12 men to be hanged on an oak tree just outside the town. The hanging tree, as it's now known, is situated where Tesco's is now been built recently. Jeffries is reputed to have lodged at the Chuffs Hotel during these local trials. During its many years of existence, the building has reportedly been used as a school and a brothel. Why is that not clicking forward? So there are numerous witchcraft rumours that have gone round that people say that used to practice within the building centuries ago, and it was a regular meeting place for the coven. Now, just as a little giggle, we couldn't get any more British than a ladies of a coven of witches drinking tea, as typical British ladies would do. So during the renovations in the hotel in 1970, a small coffin was discovered containing a mummified remains of a chuff. Some suspect the bird may have functioned as a witch's familiar. During the renovations also, an upside down concealed gravestone was discovered. So that would be over this area here. It's not visible on this photograph at all. And unfortunately, when I took one, it didn't come out, and I'll explain about that. So on this gravestone, it's upside down and it has the name Winifred inscribed on it. It is alleged that people who've tried to take a photograph of this tombstone have found that the resulting image is either foggy or it doesn't appear at all. It is said that even the most sophisticated camera equipment has been known to malfunction. Well, even if it's sophisticated, I can make it malfunction generally, but my picture here of the fireplace came out and the one of the headstone didn't. So the current owner of the Chuffs, Steve, when I had a chat to him a couple of years ago about doing an event for him at the Chuffs, running it for his business, he told me that he was very aware that there is something very paranormal there, and he feels it watches everything that goes on within the bar area. So to keep the spirits happy, Steve says good night to Winifred, and he touches the upside down grave marker every night as he closes the pub up. This hotel reports of copious ghosts and spirits roaming around the passageways and the period furnishings. The most paranormally active areas are said to be the bar. Coughing noises have been inexplicably heard in an area of the bar, which was previously a sealed room that was reopened in the 1890s. Apparitions of a male who was suspected to be Judge Jeffries has been witnessed around 1981 by a retired police officer. He said to Mrs. Peters, the landlady at the time, "That nasty looking old man crouching to the right of the fireplace, who is he?" She looked up and said, "There's nobody there." An old couple and 2 men have been seen by many witnesses over the years. Glasses have often been known to fly off the bar, but not broken. Our team has also had weird experiences in that bar. When we did our event way back, I think it must have been about 2017, ladies, you can confirm, 2016. The team's equipment started to malfunction. We had odd alarm noises that were being made that we've never heard from our equipment, and we've never heard since. Equipment batteries were being drained all at once, and Paul lost all his footage. Everything had disappeared from that night, along with my footage, everything, voice, EVPs, the lot, nothing. All we have is one live video, which is on our Facebook page for that evening, showing that our equipment was going doolally. And that's the only thing that we've got from that night to show our experiences. Moving upstairs to the bedrooms. One of the bedrooms on the first floor is said to be haunted by the ghost of a young girl called Elizabeth, who committed suicide in 1845 by drinking poison to supposedly avoid the life of prostitution that her mother and sister pursued. Another of the hotel bedrooms is said to be haunted by the ghost of a man who was brutally stabbed to death in there. Many visitors to the spooky hotel have seen an old man hanging from the attic rafters. When we went up into the rafter areas with the previous owners to Steve, we went in there to see what we could experience, and it was a closed area. We had, it was very sensitive, you know, run this all very organized. Nobody had any access to throw anything. Our hands were all visible. We made sure that we had full contact in sight with everybody who was in the room, and we were having things thrown at us up in the attic. Another paranormal activity that's been logged and reported. In 1965, Mrs Doreen Jones, a guest at the hotel, booked a room for the night. She was given a room at the front of the hotel overlooking the street. She recounts that she was awoken by 2 menacing voices, one voice appearing to be a woman who was alternating between whispering and laughing, and a male's. After a while, she got out of the bed, opened the door to look out in the corridor, but there was no one there. As soon as she got back into bed, the voices started up again. The soft woman's voice whispering and laughing again, but this time there was a more menacing male voice. The male voice increased and appeared to move towards her in the bed. She was so terrified that she fled the room down the hall to where her friend was staying and remained there for the rest of the night. The next day, she recounted the situation to the manager and told him what she'd experienced. Some years later, she was visiting Chard and popped into the hotel to see if she could see if the atmosphere was still the same. While she was there, she reminded herself to the owner. The owner went on to explain that a man staying on business had exactly the same experience, except his escalated when the male voice grew nearer towards him. He felt what he explained to be like a horsewhip across the face. And when he got out of bed and looked in the mirror, he had a huge wheeled mark across his face. He left and paid his bill very quickly the next morning. He again wasn't the only male to experience this. The SPR went on to investigate that claim. There are a lot of things that happen here, and the hotel is said to be one of the most haunted buildings in the UK. That's me done.